Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining the Blue Agility Agile Empowered webinar series. We're going to go ahead and get started. This webinar, Leverage the Power Within SAFe, is the first of 4 webinars in the series. My name is Ashley Bailey, Director of Marketing and Communications, and here with me today are your presenters, Ken France and Bobby Walters, also from Blue Agility, who will share with you tips and tricks and best practices for adopting and scaling SAFe within the enterprise. In addition, they will take you through Blue Agility's SAFe add-on, which is a customizable SAFe template, and they'll also show an example of its use in IBM Rational Team Concert. Before we get started, there are a few things I'd like to note. To avoid background noise, we do have all attendees on mute for the duration of the webinar. That doesn't mean that we don't want dialogue, so please feel free to enter your questions and comments using the chat functionality. Throughout the webinar, Ken and Bobby will answer questions both live and via the chat screen. Also, through the presentation, we will make use of polls. Please answer these polls questions so that we have an accurate representation of the audience. This webinar is being recorded, and the link to the replay will be made available to you within 24 hours. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to your first presenter, Ken France. Ken, go ahead.
Thanks, Ashley. Good morning or afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. I'm Ken France. I'm a Vice President of Delivery for Blue Agility. With me today is Bobby Walters, also on the line. And despite what some people are thinking in the company, you do not have to be bald to work for Blue Agility. Ashley appreciates that for sure. So before we get started today, I wanted to take a quick poll. We weren't quite sure who all we would get on the line today. So we wanted to do a quick poll just to get your level of experience or knowledge of SAFe before we headed into this, because then we might be able to adjust some of the content or how deep we go into a certain topic based on who we have on the line. So Ashley, can you start the first poll? If everyone could just go ahead and vote. We'll give a second for everybody to chime in. All right, it looks like we've got a good percentage of the people in there, and got a few on both ends of the scale of unaware and some that consider themselves experts. A lot of people kind of in the middle are just becoming aware and starting to adopt, and some that are actually adopting. So, so a little bit of a diverse audience. So we'll do our best to make sure we hit a little bit of the basics as we get into this for the folks that are on the early side of their knowledge, and then get into a few other topics for the folks on the latter end. All right, so let me jump back into and talk about the agenda. So today, I did want to start off, since this is the first of a series of webinars that's going to go into SAFe at greater levels of details within each one. I wanted to quickly just do a high-level SAFe overview, highlighting some of the newer changes in the 3.0 version. That'll just make sure some of the unaware and maybe aware people are sort of baseline with the rest of us. Then we'll cover some best practices. For today, I'm going to focus on best practices to drive a successful overall transformation of SAFe, looking at it holistically. The subsequent webinars will then go into each level and talk about best practices at the team level, program portfolio levels, etc. We're then going to talk about enablement and tool support with Blue Jazz and our RTC template for SAFe. And throughout the agenda, we'll be taking questions in the question area and possibly stopping from time to time to answer some key questions that come up. But we'll also give time at the end for any additional questions and just to make sure everybody can get them in. So let me just jump right into this. So for those that have been exposed to SAFe for a while, you'll know that we recently, I guess back in the end of July, went from version 2.5 of the big picture to version 3.0 of the big picture, where some changes occurred. So what I'm going to quickly do is just give a quick fly-through of SAFe and key mechanisms in SAFe. And as I do that, I'm just going to highlight some of the differences from 2.5 to 3.0 for some folks that may not have had a chance to look at the 3.0 version yet. So starting down at the team level, I like to start there when I explain SAFe because folks tend to have most familiarity with the team level of SAFe, which is really pretty much the Scrum, the core Scrum that folks are used to. You've got your concepts of Agile teams that work in 2 to 4 week time boxes and implement user stories, spikes, or refactors within those time boxes. So pretty much the concept that you're used to. A couple key differences of the team level and the SAFe context is that because you're operating under the governance of a program layer that I'll get to in a second, you are going to have some team objectives that align with the overall program objectives that you'll capture. And there's a very heavy focus in SAFe on code quality, in particular at the team level, focusing on some of the XP practices to make sure you're really building that firm foundation. If you look at a couple of the changes that happened from 2.5 to 3.0 within SAFe, one of them is the renaming of the final sprint within a program increment it was previously called the HIP sprint. And the H was dropped in SAFe 3.0 to call it an IP sprint. The idea there is to really defocus that last sprint on the hardening aspect. What we were seeing out in the industry is that folks were deferring too much technical debt or some of their integration work into the hardening sprint, when that was really meant to do the final packaging to possibly deploy something if you were going to deploy at the end of that, as well as focus on the two initials that were left behind, innovation and planning. So giving the team time to innovate and spend time doing those things they haven't had a chance to do throughout the program increment, and then focusing on planning for the next increment coming up. So the dropping of the H was a key change in 3.0. In addition, just bubbling up some of the key, most important XP practices, Agile architecture, continuous integration, and test first, as some of the core ones you really want to focus early on in your journey with SAFe to make sure that, again, we're building a solid foundation to scale on top of. As you move up to the program layer, you're first taking some of the key concepts of Scrum at the team level and scaling it up to the program. Right away, you'll notice the graphic is very much different in 3.0 from 2.5. You can see the graphic now encompasses the team and the program levels together. That's really to highlight the fact that the combination of these two layers, which is really the Agile release train, represents not only the team of teams, all the teams, excuse me, at the team level, but then the additional program roles that and teams that occur at the program level. In the prior version, it was more separated and it looked disjoint. So this is really reinforcing the collaboration, and it's almost like the two levels together are the analogy of the Agile team scaled up to the program. So you still have the product owner scaling up to the product manager, with the product manager being the business-facing role and the product owner being the team or technology-facing role. So that's a key scaling mechanism. The Scrum Master really scales up to that release train engineer role. That's making sure all the teams are working together and collaborating, and that program-level impediments are removed that the teams can't remove themselves. The concept of the time box, the 2-week time box at the team level, scales up to what is now referred to as a program increment, which I'll talk about in a minute. But essentially, you know, putting together multiple development sprints in that IP sprint into a larger program increment scales that concept of a time box at the team level up to the program level, so you're planning a little longer horizon at the program level. And instead of stories that you implement at the team level, you're implementing larger business and architectural features that will finish in that program increment time box. You notice a variety of other roles that are present at the program layer. In particular, I want to call out the system team, which is really there to help perform various functions to make all the teams at the team level more productive and make sure that the system is coming together holistically with the output from all the individual teams. So the system team focuses on making sure environments are available. As stories are finished by teams, they focus on bringing those together to ensure that features are actually able to be visible and validated by product management. So they're performing that integration end-to-end testing function that's really making sure each and every sprint throughout the program increment that we're making the system come together. Whoops, wrong way. So as I mentioned, the term program increment replaced what was previously called a potentially shippable increment, or PSI. This is really to further focus on the separation between the development cadence and their delivery or the release cadence. So the prior name implied that the actual increment would be shipped at the end of the PSI, which was not necessarily the case. It still could be, but this real focus on separating the development from the release cadence led to that program increment renaming. You notice this concept of program epics that are now at the program level. These can be used for two purposes. They can be from business or architectural epics that are first initiated at the portfolio level that will end up being split across multiple release trains. So the portion that's for this specific release train could be captured as a program epic. This is also for large pieces of work envisioned by the product management team that cannot be completed within a program increment. So you can capture these epics there to track that work throughout the multiple increments that are needed to complete it. Because of the size, they still need to get approval from the portfolio management function and visibility there, but they may not be managed up here like the other epics are. They may still be managed locally at the program layer. The shared resources icon made a comeback in SAFe 3.0. It went away in 2.5, and really there was more and more emphasis being placed on the importance of interacting with the other parts of the enterprise that are critical for the release train to be able to deploy its functionality, DBAs, security, desktop services. All of these folks, it's very important, so that icon came back. The new graphic around the release object and really showing how the release object is evolving and expanding through every release, whether that release happens mid-PI or at a PI boundary. Just a little more reinforcement around that. Moving up to the portfolio layer, you'll notice that the overall graphic gives a much better view of how work flows from a centralized concept down into local execution within each release train. It all starts out with a much more heavy focus on the big picture of lean agile leadership and how that is so critical to tying all this together, all three levels, and how leadership is going to play a key role. We'll touch on that one again later. So these are the four principles that are really focused on in lean agile leadership that will become very critical as we move forward. So the concept of strategic themes were introduced in SAFe 3.0 that ties your business strategy to your portfolio vision. Think of these as a set of high-level objectives of what you're trying to accomplish in the portfolio. There's much more guidance on how release trains collaborate with each other to make sure the enterprise overall is delivering sound integrated functionality, so a lot deeper content there. And then metrics have been focused in the areas where they're relevant. There used to be just one metrics icon at the portfolio level that talked about all the metrics, and now they're split between portfolio and release train metrics. In addition, there's some additional guidance around lean agile budgeting beyond just project cost accounting, and it's really there to help reinforce the concept of rather than forming projects that are then staffed with people and then they go away at the end of a project, which is the traditional thinking, this concept of forming permanent teams, permanent release trains, and continually approving budget to have the next set of valuable work flow to those teams. So bringing the work to the people as opposed to bringing the people to the work. And then finally, a recognition that non-functional requirements do exist at the portfolio level as well and belong on that backlog. So a focus on the non-functional requirements being incorporated just for a second and see if there's any questions or what have you that we need to answer. Has anything been queued up?
Ken, I don't see any questions for you, although just briefly for about 30 seconds, I think we lost your audio there at the end.
Okay. Can you hear me now okay?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Let me...
All right, I will continue. Yeah, I don't see any questions either in there.
Yep, me neither. Okay.
Okay, so let me get into some of the best practices. Again, I'm going to focus on best practices for the overall implementation, and then as we go through the team program portfolio webinars going forward, we'll dive into each of those levels and get into best practices. So one of the key things that's important to look at is really looking at this as an overall transformation. You have to be very intentional in planning and executing that transformation, just like you're intentional about planning and executing your program increments and your releases of the software. So from that perspective, we talk about using SAFe to deploy SAFe. And what we mean by that is not necessarily applying every concept in SAFe, but taking out some of the key mechanisms that make SAFe valuable to plan and execute your technical work and applying it to your transformation itself. So that implies having a vision and roadmap, up front to guide that overall deployment, making sure that there's clear objectives, what you want to accomplish, and that those are measurable objectives that you'll be able to track throughout the transformation. When you start to define what actually has to happen to get the work done, you can organize that using the same epic feature story construct as you see in SAFe, and there's an example over here of some of the potential epics that you might have to drive a large-scale transformation. So you capture and organize the work and then plan out a roadmap just like you would plan out a roadmap for technical functionality. So this implies having the concept of product managers or product owners or somebody that's making the decision on what is the important work to get done to move closer towards those objectives. You could have planning sessions to plan out the next PI. Oops, yeah, even I use the old acronym. The PI or sprints if you're going to get down to that level of granularity. And then really looking at a continuous improvement backlog for inspecting and adapting on the parts you've already done and then looking forward to the future. So this is just a key best practice to use the concepts in SAFe to drive the transformation. But a warning in that is to keep it light. We found that if you try to go too far with implementing too many of the SAFe mechanisms for this, that it can get a little bit too heavy and get in the way of driving the transformation. So keep it light. Use it to maintain alignment across the organization, alignment with maybe your Agile transformation team that's driving the transformation day to day, and making sure you're communicating out to the right people, but don't overdo it with this one. Going back to the leadership concept that was talked about on the big picture, the foundation of SAFe and what's called the House of Lean is leadership. So from an overall transformation perspective, it's oftentimes a lot of folks will just jump in and sort of start with a pilot project. Let's just get somebody up on either Scrum or SAFe, try to get a release train going. And let's just start bottoms up, get a few wins under our belt, and then go to management with some success stories. While this could be a successful approach, we find that it's typically better to go directly to management and leadership early on. And even if you can't get their full buy-in for a large-scale transformation, you're at least going to do some initial education and exposing them to some of the concepts and starting to set their expectations on what's feasible to come out both early, middle, and long term. So engaging leadership early on and getting them to be part of the transformation is key, and the more engagement you can get from them, the higher success rate your transformation will have. Another best practice is a lot of times folks will tend to really focus in on the process, learning Scrum, learning SAFe, learning the mechanisms of that, maybe understanding Kanban, some of the ceremonies, the technology, the tools behind it. Those are the things people tend to gravitate to initially. But change management and people, the people aspect of this is probably of anything going to be your biggest challenge. So making sure that you directly address the people aspect of it early on is key. There's multiple facets to that, but one of the ones that we found that becomes an impediment early on is that folks will look at the big picture and they won't see themselves on it. Well, I'm a such and such role, I don't see my name there. I'm a business analyst and I play at the program portfolio layer, but I don't see myself on the big picture. So what you need to do is give people a home. look at what their role is today, understand how work gets done in your organization, and look at how work will get done in SAFE and what decisions are going to be made by which people, and help them understand what their role in the new world is going to be, and be a little bit explicit even about what the changes are going to take to do that. You may talk about training and enablement that they're going to get in order to facilitate that. But everybody's going to try to find their home on the big picture, and so you need to address that and head that off as soon as possible, because otherwise you'll start to get some of the different personalities that you see show up here. You should also be ready for the fact that some people may not like the house you're building. You know, they may not be on board with what it's going to take to do the transformation, and so you want to know that as early as possible, but expect that some people may decide to move out of the house during construction and decide to live elsewhere. And that's inevitable, that's fine, and you'd rather know that earlier rather than later after you get down the road. Finally is being pragmatic. You know, a lot of times you have folks that, you know, just want to follow the rules, and it's a SAFE framework, so I have to do everything that's on the SAFE framework. You don't always need to do that. It is a framework that's meant to be tailored to your specific situation. Look at your situation, understand the intent and the spirit and what practice is behind whatever you're looking at in SAFE, either the role or the ceremony of the team, and don't be afraid to experiment. Try something in your environment, see if it works, and then just inspect and adapt as you go. Don't be too much a slave to what's in the framework, and really implement the framework for the sake of, you know, it's on the big picture and we learned about it in training. So stay true to the spirit and intent, and just you know, be bold and experiment and inspect and adapt as you go along. So that's what I have for my high-level pass through SAFE and key best practices for the overall transformation. At this point, again, I'll pause for any final questions on that section before I turn it over to Bobby to go into to Blue Jazz and the template. Anything come in yet, Ashley?
Nope, I don't see anything.
Okay, then why don't we pass it over to Bobby?
Okay. And I think just to get a sense of what everyone is using as far as their Agile planning, we're going to launch another poll before Bobby begins.
Okay, yeah, actually somebody does have their hand raised. Bennett? I don't know if we can unmute him. Okay. His question is, when does hardening happen?
Coming back off mute. So hardening happens, typically there'll be a separate in that part of SAFE that talks about releasing on demand. Depending on what your release cycle is, you oftentimes will, once a team delivers a sprint or a PI, it oftentimes goes into a final hardening phase. I do want to qualify that the absolute ideal scenario is that all regression tests, all hardening, anything that has to be done to actually be able to deploy into production is actually done in sprint. So that at the end of a sprint, you could actually take that output of that sprint and directly deploy it into production. Doing it at scale, it's oftentimes difficult to do that because you may have multiple teams that were contributing to that release object. So there's oftentimes sort of a separate path that those changes then go through to be hardened that oftentimes maybe has a final user acceptance test or something on it, and then at that point it goes into production. So the big picture doesn't directly show that separate thread, but that concept of releasing on demand means that that final hardening piece happens outside the cadence of that development cadence of the sprints and PIs. So it's a separate thread that gets does the hardening. Okay, Bobby, you want to take it from there?
Uh, well, yeah, there's actually another question that came in. It says, this is from Ali. Could you give examples of acceptable versus not acceptable customization of SAFe?
That's a tough question to answer, just because there's a lot of potential potential changes that you could make to SAFe. One of the example of, I'll just give some examples of things that have been suggested in the past that maybe were not a good idea. Just like in Scrum, if once you choose your sprint length, your sprint duration, you don't want to change that duration from sprint to sprint. So if you choose 2 weeks, you don't want to do a 2-week sprint, then a 3-week sprint, et cetera. So that same would hold true at the program increment. A lot of times folks want to change the duration of a program increment to correspond to when they want to release. So they're trying to align their development cadence to the release cadence by changing the duration of the PI. And so that's a non-optimal way to do it, because just like you want to become predictable at how much output a team can create within a sprint, you want to become predictable at how much output a release train can generate in a PI. So if you're continually changing the duration of your PI, then you're not on that same development cadence and you're not predictable in what you're producing. I would say some of the other key things that are sort of sacred that you would not want to change is that concept of content authority at each of those layers. Having a product owner, a product manager, and the portfolio management function controlling the prioritization of the work at each layer. You wouldn't want to remove that function and have that prioritization happen elsewhere. So some examples of good customizations could be, there are teams where the big picture shows that Scrum is the only thing that happens at the team level. There have been some teams that have adopted Kanban at the team level that are more production support focused, or their work is less predictable. And so you can still operate a team within Kanban at the team level. They would just need to then synchronize their output at key times with the other teams that are on the cadence, so that the teams can still all work and integrate together. So those are just a few examples of what may be good and not good in terms of customizing SAFe, but the examples are many. Bobby, you see any other questions?
Ken, it looks like there is.
Anand had his hand raised, but
I think I see that one. We can answer this one and then move on to Bobby. The question is, any tips on training teams on SAFe?
So training teams on SAFe, certainly there's the Scrum XP class, which is the standard way that SAFe recommends you enable at the team level. So that's the 2-day class that teaches them the mechanics of Scrum and how to work within the SAFe context. So that's definitely a good class for that initial enablement. We tend to like to do that literally right before they head into the PI planning, the release planning for their first program increment, and then start the sprint the very next day. So very rapidly go from that training class to actually doing it hands-on is the key mechanism. What you'll then use is, that's sort of the launch, the initial kickoff, and that's also preceded by training the leadership with the leading SAFe class so that the leaders are ready. But focusing on the team after the Scrum XP class, it's going to be really important to stay close to and monitor that team and leverage the team level assessments that are available in SAFe to understand what they may be struggling with, and then really do spot coaching and spot training as needed to get over those humps. So the ideal scenario is after that training they have a coach or somebody that can be with them embedded in for a sprint or two, but really watching and understanding where they're struggling and then bringing to bear the coaching or training as needed to get them over the hump. But that's how we would typically get a team up and running. Okay, Ashley, do we want to move on to Bobby at this point? We can take more questions at the end.
Absolutely. Bobby, go ahead.
Okay, thank you everyone. My name is Bobby Walters, and today we're going to discuss the BlueJazz platform and talk about the benefits of using BlueJazz and how it can help with maturing your Agile, adoption or any other processes. But the focus for this one is centered around the SAFe 2.5 version. So Ken highlighted some differences between SAFe 2.5 and 3.0, and we're in the process of updating our material as well, since that is a recent version that came out. But we still wanted to highlight some of the the cool things that we've done to help enable people and spread the message about the process adoption. So this is the main view for the BlueJazz website. We're leveraging the SAFe Big Picture. And you'll notice that the navigation elements are the exact same points that are on the SAFe or ScaledAgileFramework.com website. From here, we'd be able to pick a particular area that we want to get more information on. And just happen to click on Release Planning. And you'll notice that the information presented here is a combination of artifacts from the Scaled Agile Framework website, as well as additional content that helps people actually adopt the Scaled Agile 2.5 version with this one. This is freely accessible on the web, and we can provide those links to you guys after the session is over. But for the sake of the demo, we have a variety of content that we'd like to show and highlight what we call our knowledge corpus within the BlueJazz platform. So there's a couple of different things within BlueJazz that we think really make it shine. So there's the additional video content. So people have a variety of ways of absorbing information. Some people are very good at reading textbooks and analyzing that data and having a solid comprehension of that. Other people tend to prefer more of an audio-visual look on that. So to cater to as many people as we can to make again, learning a potentially brand new process or just improving your existing knowledge, we've provided some videos to help demonstrate what the process is doing at that particular point. And this is one of our fun ones for preparing for the release planning. And we talked about this a little bit in Ken's segment, but here's a video that kind of demonstrates what we're release planning is scheduled to look like. So I'll play this video. Okay, and again, the videos are designed to be a little bit fun, but still get the information across, and perhaps a way that you may not have thought of it before, but really to help explain the the purpose of the process at that given point in time, or around those particular set of artifacts, and the roles and responsibilities that would be partaking in that activity. So the video content represents, a portion of the knowledge corpus that we have within Blue Jazz, and I alluded to, there's several activities that would help, describe that, process or point in the process. So within Blue Jazz, we have these activities specified that correlate, who's responsible for, producing that, artifact result, or is it setting up some, stand-up meetings, or getting the interaction of several different partners together? Is it making sure the release train is on point? But several different activities that can come out through the process. And one of the nice things about Blue Jazz is that the activities can actually be designed to fit your own maturity level. So for the demonstration purposes, we do have quite a few activities listed, but you may not be in a point in your adoption that all of these are applicable. So within the framework itself of Blue Jazz, just like SAFE suggests that you pick the parts that are important to you at the point that they're most applicable, you can do the same thing with the radiation of the information about the process and the adoption at that point in time. So again, it's trying to be flexible, but still have a central voice and way to radiate out that information. So these activities would represent a given set of steps within the process as well as the tool. And for the technology aspect, our demo is set up to leverage the Rational Team Concert platform, and we've modified it to have the SAFE add-on. So we're instrumenting Rational Team Concert to supply and leverage artifacts that come from SAFE to illustrate different views, provide metrics and things that would help with the adoption, as well as improving the efficiency of teams that have currently been using the Scaled Agile framework. So from Blue Jazz, we're able to launch what we call guides, and these guides will actually tie into the live instance of, in this case, Rational Team Concert. But we would be able to go into Rally or version 1 or any number of web-based applications. But for the sake of this, we're going to show just a sampling of what the SAFE add-on has to offer.
Bobby, I just saw a request to make your screen larger, if that's possible.
The browser?
Yeah. Perfect, thank you.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. Okay, yeah, so the guide is actually running inside of a version of Rational Team Concert, and we're going to go through just some of the steps here. So if you're adopting SAFE and you're adopting a new tool, any sort of ALM solution, it's usually kind of complicated to tie in the process along with the tooling. So to get to that holistic solution view, we've crafted these guides to help out with that, or the technology to help with that. So inside of RTC, if we go into the project areas, you can see that we've advanced to the next step just because we clicked onto that project area, and the step down at the bottom says open the work items menu. And if we click on that, we're now able to see a list of the artifacts that we can create. Now, some of these, if you've used Rational Team Concert in the past, you may be familiar with, like stories or epics. But all of these artifacts are tailored for the Scaled Agile Framework website, and their intended use within the framework as suggested by the SAFE. So epics from traditional Scrum are slightly modified, and the introduction of the feature component itself. So this is just to again quickly highlight the available work items, and then from this we can extrapolate the different views or plans, and then the metrics to help support the adoption. So just following along with the guide just very quickly, again we can see that the guide steps get updated, but it also has this nice feature to do a text speech. So you can actually click on this. And again, the idea here is to provide a multitude of ways for people to engage with the application, to learn the process, but then also to retain it. And one of the things that we've really focused on was making sure that a lot of these things were easily accessible and adhering to the process maturity level at a given point in time of an organization. So these guides can be crafted by anyone with the use of our designer once it becomes available. But the idea, again, is that you're in the live application. So whichever your ALM tool of choice is, if it happens to be Rally, there would be a pointer to specify the name of the feature at the appropriate location. But again, we're inside of Rational Team Concert here. So if I just cancel out of this, and we can always get back on track too. So I just happen to exit out of that. I can skip back in steps and then figure out where I need to get back on track to finish out the guide. Okay. So if we just go back here to hide that for a second. All right, so a couple of the things that we talked about, I just want to quickly demonstrate, are some of the work items, the plan views and things that we've added. And in the subsequent webinars, we'll go into those in more detail based on the level within SAFE. So we'll do a deeper dive into the portfolio, the program, and then the team level. But here we'll just quickly highlight that the SAFE add-on for RTC does fully implement SAFE 2.5 within the Rational Team Concert environment, which is a part of the BlueJazz platform. So here we have a couple of quick dashboards, the epic capacity allocation. Again, the ability to quickly distinguish between business and architectural value epics. Another view of that might be the portfolio Kanban. So being able to articulate which epics are going to provide business value, when they're going to be planned for, how many we currently have in flight, and the same for architectural epics. You'll notice that the suggested colors, like red for architecture and blue for business, we do have that represented within the SAFE template as well, or SAFE add-on, excuse me. But red does not mean bad. It just means that we are highlighting architectural value. So from here, we normally would go into like the backlog of the plan, but we can skip to some of the current plans. And one thing to note that, again, with the out-of-the-box support for Scrum inside of Team Concert, you're used to seeing the task board views and things like that, but we really had to enhance the views that are available inside of Rational Team Concert to fully support SAFE. So one of those views that we're always looking for is the ability to track feature completeness. And within inside of Team Concert, we have a view that was created to assist with that. And there's a couple different scenarios for this. So the completeness could actually be on the PSI as the main pivot point, or it could actually be on the team. For this view, as you can see, it's mostly centered around which sprint. So you would be able to track very quickly when the feature is expected to get completed. If there happens to be a team that's kind of struggling, there'd be quick ways to identify that information as well. All right. So this is, again, just another view that's been added in. There's a couple other, like we saw in the video, there's a program board representation. And within the limits of the table layout provided by the views in RTC, we tried to get represent that string tying the different features and things together with this particular column, this depends on column. But the idea is that you could use this to do your review sessions at the end of PSI or release planning. So the management review sections, you'd be able to say, okay, we've got these couple of features. We recognize that there's some dependencies across them, and we just need to keep track of all of that. So this provides a clear understanding of what is what and which teams are involved. So if we switch over to the risk roaming, this again might be leveraged during the management review section. So if you've been able to adopt a 2-day release planning cycle, you would be able to collect these risks or potential impediments on the first day. The management team would take a look at them and then figure out how to resolve them, get them an owner, just accept that risk, or to figure out a mitigation strategy. And all of that is represented within the SAFE add-on for RTC as well. Okay. So again, we do have a couple of other views that are available at the program level, but we'll go into more detail in the deeper dive sessions in the following webinars. Just to switch over to the team view. Okay. So if we go into one of the team views for sprint plan, again, you can just see that we've extended the capabilities of RTC. So one thing we want to highlight is that everything that you've learned with RTC or everything that you've learned with Scrum as you're adopting or maturing your SAFE adherence, all that information is still valuable and can still be leveraged. The SAFE template is additional configuration to provide the metrics and the language and the artifacts to communicate using SAFE as a guidance. So the work breakdown view, from here you can get a sense of who owns a particular task, what task, by completing that task, how is it impacting my story? So how close am I to getting that completed? And then in turn, because we've added in the feature, you'll be able to get a better sense of what's going to be ready at the end of that program increment or the PSI or potentially shippable increment, depending on which version of SAFE you're currently using. So from here, the big thing is just to make sure that we have that hierarchy in place. Yep. Okay. So I got a note. Can everybody hear me? I got a note that I was disconnected.
I can hear you okay, Bobby.
Yes, Ken, I can hear you fine and see what you're doing fine.
Okay, yeah. Sorry about that. Just making sure. Okay. Yeah. So do we have any questions on what we've seen so far? Coming up.
Bobby, we did have one question on when the 3.0 of SAFE version will be available for this particular template.
That is a good question. We're currently in the process of updating BlueJazz, so that way the first quarter of next year we should have things in place to actually release before the IBM conference. It's called Interconnect now. So before then, we should have everything ready to go.
Great, thank you. I don't see any other questions.
Okay. And since there's no questions, one of the cool things that we did add into BlueJazz that I wanted to touch on, since we have a couple minutes, as you're adopting SAFE or any process that you're trying to get adherence to within your organization, sometimes it's nice to just be able to ask random questions to a virtual consultant, right? So sometimes the consultant needs to travel, it won't always be on site, but we've added in this hook to IBM Watson. And if you're not familiar with Watson, it's a component to do cognitive searching. And this is the essence of my question has a context. So Watson understands the context that the question is being posed in. And the context would be the client site in this case. So within your environment, if you're with organization ABC, if you ask a question, how long is release planning? Yeah, Watson would be able to present an answer that is very specific for you and your group, whereas company XYZ may ask the same thing and get a different answer just because the information has been tailored toward your client needs or your environment. So we have this little icon at the bottom that represents Watson, and by clicking here, I can ask him any question about SAFe for this example. So if I put in something like, what is PPM? And he'll come back with the response. And the idea here is that you're working with a virtual consultant. So any question that if you feel like you've already covered or you just want to get some more clarity on, Watson would be around to help out with that. And we think a very clean way. But the idea is that, again, you're getting the information out. You have one place to point people to all of the data. So as you're changing the activities, you're moving things around, you're improving the process. You've brought in more of the framework from SAFe side. You can tailor new guides to help with that and to explain what it means to actually take the process with the tool and then build out your solution. So that way you have everybody on the same page. They have the knowledge and the retention through the various mechanisms to get the information out to the audience. And then the clarity that they are doing it in your environment. So it's not a perfect virtual machine from a classroom setting. This is going to be perfect for your environment in your live instance of your ALM tool or whatever you're using for Agile planning or that particular process. Okay. So I know we're getting close to the end of time. Let's see if you have any questions.
Bobby, this is Ken. I've been answering some of the questions that came in. The only one that's outstanding is there was a question from Sashi Kumar about they have multiple release train engineers for the same train because the release train is spread across 3 regions. And the question is this model supported? So I was trying to clarify if the question was, is it supported in the template that you were demoing in the tool, or is this a SAFe process supported concept? Let me address the SAFe process concept. As I said when I was during my part of the presentation, customizations of the framework for your environment, make a lot of sense. So would you find guidance in the framework for how to deal with having multiple release, train engineers for the same train? Probably not, but I think that's a valid experiment to try having those proxy RTEs at the different locations to make sure the planning goes smoothly there, and then using your one coordinator RTE, if you will, to bring it all together. It's a similar model that you see if you were actually talking 3 different release trains and they all had dependencies on each other and needed to be coordinated. You would typically see the release train engineers collaborating with each other across those trains to make sure they're solid. But I see no reason why that couldn't happen within a release train as well. So I think that's a great experiment for you to try from a process perspective. So if it was a tool-centric question, I'm not sure I understand exactly what's being asked there, so you could have to clarify that. All right, I think we're in the final question and answer session here.
Not seeing any other questions come through. I know a few folks wanted to see the video that was shown a bit more clearly, so I did send a YouTube link for that. So folks should have seen that link come out through the question screen. Not seeing any more questions. Okay. Well, thanks, Bobby and Ken, and thank you to all of our attendees. We know how hard it is sometimes to take just an hour out of your workday. It's our hope that you not only learn something new to take back to your team, but you're also really excited about the content that was shared. I know we just briefly touched on that Watson component and the SAFE add-on, but we'll take a deeper dive into the subsequent webinars. And this was the first webinar in the 4-part Agile Empowered series. The second webinar, Empower the Team with Blue Jazz, Develop on Cadence with Safe Agile Planning, is on Wednesday, October 8th. And the link to register for that is shown here. The following webinars, like Bobby mentioned, will go through the program and portfolio levels of SAFE. And in true Agile fashion, we do shape our webinars based on attendee feedback and inspect and adapt accordingly. So please take a moment to fill out the short survey that'll be shown right as we exit the webinar. And once again, thank you all, and we hope to talk to you soon. Good afternoon, everyone.